the way our government is functioning and the way our world is going, we have no idea where we will be in the next 5 years.
My Lord.
So, I want to take a moment and thank each and every church. First of all, I want to thank my president for the opportunity to stand in this desk. This is a privilege. It is not a right. So I want to thank him for this opportunity to stand before the people of God. But I want to thank if this is my last time, I want to thank every church I've been privileged to pastor. I want to thank my very first church, the East Trenton Church in Trenton, New Jersey. I want to thank the saints of God at the Metropolitan Church in Plainfield, at the University Church in New Brunswick, the saints in Macedonia, in Chester. I want to thank all of the saints at Mount Olivet in Camden for 12 years, 8 months, and 9 days. And now I want to thank my two churches. The Walnut Street Community in Pottstown and the Grace Tabernacle Church in Norristown. Amen. It is the best two-church district in all of the Allegheny East Conference, barring none.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Now let me share this with you. I've been placed on planet Earth to do one thing. And that is to prepare God's people for the coming of the Lord. And other than that one thing, I don't have any purpose for existing. And so when I stand before you, my purpose and my objective is to prepare you for the most important event in the history of planet Earth. Because if you miss that, all of this has been in vain. Amen? Amen. So, this is the most important message that I have preached in my ministry in 36 years. It is not because it is the one that I'm preaching now, but it's the one, as my former teacher and mentor, Pastor E.C. Ward said, he said, it's later than it's ever been. So, I'm going to talk to you about the chosen ones. Now, this is how this is going to go. I'm going to share with you seven chosen ones. I'm going to focus on the first 4 in rapid session. I'm going to spend the majority of my time on chosen one number 5. And then number 6 and 7 will bring up the rear. But the most important of all the 7 will be chosen one number 7. Because of the subject matter, the nature of the subject matter, I'm going to teach first, and then at the end, I'll do some preaching. Amen? God, you listen with me as we consider the subject, the chosen ones. Father God, I ask that you would bless me now. I ask, as always, that you would use me as a conduit through which your blessings will flow, born from glory, as Elder Moses would say to your people. May you be glorified in the process. In Jesus' name I ask. For his sake, I pray. Amen. From time to time throughout recorded history, God has chosen and handpicked individuals to perform a certain task for him. These chosen individuals have been handpicked and chosen for the purpose of impacting the people of God both directly and indirectly. These chosen ones impact the church, the existing government or governments, and society as a whole. I will shine a spotlight on 7 that have been chosen and handpicked by God. So here we go. Esther was chosen to save God's people from wholesale annihilation. Moses was chosen to lead God's people out of Egypt, negotiate the release from the hands of a heathen king. Pharaoh was one of the chosen ones so that God's mighty power would be on display for all to see. It was that display of power that terrorized some heathens, but caused others like Rahab the harlot to reverence the God of heaven and ultimately marry a prince in Israel and be the progenitor of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. Cyrus, king of the Medes and Persians, was chosen by God 150 years before he was even born to defeat the Babylonians and to defeat Belshazzar and the Babylonians. He redirected the Euphrates River and entered the palace unexpectedly when Belshazzar was having a party for all of his nobles. In Cyrus' first year in office, he permitted the Jews to return to Jerusalem, and he provided them with much needed supplies to rebuild the temple and the city. I'm talking about chosen ones tonight. My next chosen one is my favorite modern day author. She is the most prolific woman writer in the history of the United States of America. Her name is Ellen Gould Harmon White. She's written more books, more articles, more pamphlets than any other woman in the history of the United States of America. She belongs on a U.S. stamp. Amen. I'm still talking about the chosen ones. And for the next few minutes, I want to transition to the most significant chosen one, arguably of our lifetime. Before I do that, we need to examine Revelation 13 and take a careful look at the second beast within Revelation chapter 13. The pericope I want to focus on starts with verse 11. It says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." Verse 12, "And he causeth." Ladies and gentlemen, the Greek word for causeth comes from the word poreo. Poreo means to force. Poreo means that a time is coming when there are going to be entities within the U.S. that are going to force you to worship in a particular way. They're going to take your options away. They're going to say to you, you have to worship. You do not have a choice. Poreo. That, "and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to proskuneo," to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Verse 15, "And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and do what? Cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed." Now, we Seventh-day Adventists believe that this beast represents the United States of America in prophecy. The question that many of us have asked, myself included, is how in the world can such events take place in a country that has been the land of the free and the home of the brave? Permit me to deal with both the why and the how this prophecy will take place. When the events of Revelation 13 begin to take place, Satan is desperate. He's running out of time, and to implement his plan of world domination, he's running out of time to secure world domination. And to accomplish his mission, Satan resorts to subterfuge and deception. Why? Because no one in their right mind would worship the devil. So he's got to trick you into doing it. He's got to trick you into bowing down to him. Ellen White prophesies that Satan will raise up Christians in the last day and convince them that if America is to be saved, they are the one and only ones that will save it. Referring to these deceived individuals who are convinced that they are doing the will of God when they attempt to enforce Sunday worship on Americans and ultimately the rest of the world, Ellen White says this, and I quote, "Under the enemy's training, their zeal will grow until, like the Jews, they will think they are doing God a service by heaping reproach on those who have the moral courage to keep his commandments." They will think they are doing God a favor to punish and ultimately to kill us because they think they're right. Now, what's the name of this movement? Well, I want you to know that Ellen White didn't give it a name. Well, why not? Because truth is progressive. If God gave you all truth at one time, you would stop searching, you would stop studying, you would stop reading. He gives it to you piecemeal, so you keep searching for it. He wants you hungering and thirsting for the Word of God. So God didn't give Ellen White the name of this movement, but we've now identified the name. The name of the movement is called Dominionism. Ladies and gentlemen, never forget this word. Dominionism is the most dangerous ideology in America today, without exception. Millions of Americans, from preachers to politicians and everyday people across this nation, have embraced it. Evangelicals have embraced it. Conservatives have embraced it. And even the Southern Baptist Convention, with all 14 million members, have embraced this ideology. I dare say that one of the most, if not the most dangerous groups in America are the evangelicals and the conservatives. Because dominionism is behind much of the political appointments and the policies that they are putting in place today, even though you don't realize it. And they are doing it on the down low with stealth. And it's dangerous. And it's a threat to your freedom and your sovereignty. Dominionism, ladies and gentlemen, is founded on Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, which says, "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion." Dominionists also are referred to as Christian Reconstructionists. And they are desirous of taking over the United States first, and then extending that to the entire world, but they are desirous of doing it by force. They believe that before the coming of Christ, the Lord will set up his literal kingdom on earth, run by Christians, in spite of the fact that Christ said that my kingdom is not of this world. Otherwise, my followers would fight. Dominionists teach that Christians have been mandated by God to create a Christian state across America, much like ISIS is attempting to establish an Islamic state in Iraq and throughout the Middle East. Can I share with you what dominionism will look like when it is fully implemented in this country? And it is coming. May I share with you what it looks like? Here it is. Here's what they say. They say the death penalty is to be imposed not only incorrigible juvenile delinquency, and in the case of women, sex before marriage, sexual immorality. With that litany of offenses, a whole lot of us are going to be in trouble. When dominionism is fully established in the U.S., interracial marriages will once again be outlawed. This Christian state of America would be created through the reclaiming of the 7 mountains of cultural influence. They believe that there are 7 areas of cultural influence that they want to dominate and control. They are namely the government, business and finance rather, government. That's why there's a certain political party that whenever they're in office, they want to make sure that Supreme Court justices vote and they believe the way they believe. That's why they put in not just Supreme Court justices, but all of the judges, even from the highest court to the lower courts all throughout the U.S. They want to make sure that their dominionist ideology is carried out on a judicial level. They want to control the family. Would you like to know why Roe v. Wade is being retracted? It is because in red states, in states in the U.S. where there are Republican legislatures, they are rolling back Roe versus Wade because it is contrary to their ideology. Abortion is contrary to their ideology of dominionism. They want to take over religion, media, education, arts, and entertainment. Dominionists believe that if they take over these 7 centers of cultural influence, they will take over the U.S. and the world by force. Dominionists or Christian Reconstructionists want to recreate the Old Testament theocracy. The Old Testament theocracy, ladies and gentlemen. Theocracy, compound Greek word, theos, God, kratia, the rule by, theocracy, the rule by or the rule of God. In the Old Testament, God ruled supremely before there were kings. God would speak to the high priest, and the high priest would deliver his message directly to the high priest and the high priest to Israel. God would shine a light on the breastplate of the high priest. He would shine a light on the right side for approval or the left side for disapproval. And that information would be distributed directly to his people. There were no intermediaries. Theocracy. Dominionists also want to establish not only the theocracy from the Old Testament, but the theonomy from the Old Testament. Theonomy, also compound Greek word, theos, God, nomos, law. It is the rule by God's law. In Old Testament times, if you blaspheme God's names, you could be taken down and killed. If you violated the Sabbath, everything was run by the law of God. They want to bring that back. They also want to bring back the death decree for spiritual things. Theocracy, theonomy. One of the leading proponents of dominionism was a man by the name of R.J. Rushdoony. Here's what he believes. He says, those considered by the Christian state to be immoral and incapable of reform are to be exterminated. But Chris Hedges, whom I love, has exposed them. He spent 2 years with conservatives. 2 years. He's written a book, bestseller, New York Times, American Fascists. Next slide. American Fascists, the Christian right and the war on America. Chris Hedges says this. He says, under Christian dominion, America will be no longer a sinful and fallen nation, but one in which the 10 Commandments form the basis of our educational system. Doesn't sound too bad to start off, but it gets worse. And the media and the government proclaim the good news to one and all. Labor unions and public schools will be abolished. You need to know, ladies and gentlemen, that the reason why Betsy DeVos is the head of the education department, in spite of the fact that she has no degrees in education, nor does she have any experience in education, but she hates public schools. You need to understand that public schools are underfunded because they want to eliminate public schools. Because Betsy DeVos and Dominionists are proponents of the fact that public schools are hellholes, and America's children need to go to Christian schools and Christian charter schools, and they are in the process of trying to make public schools defunct and disappear. Dominionism. They will be abolished. Women will be removed from the workplace to stay at home, and all those deemed insufficiently Christian will be denied citizenship. The only legitimate voices in this state will be Christian. All others will be silenced. That's what Dominionists believe. Dominionists believe in a hostile, militaristic takeover of America that violates the U.S. Constitution. This is absolutely against the Constitution, because here's what it says: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. I want you to listen to this short video clip by a prominent Dominionist by the name of Rick Joyner.
I believe our only hope is a military takeover, martial law, and that the most crucial element of that is who the marshal is going to be.
Rick says the only way we're going to get America back to where it needs to be, we need to go into martial law. And America needs to become a police state to correct the ills of society. I'm going to come back to that later. But we shouldn't be surprised that this is coming, ladies and gentlemen, because Revelation 13:12, I repeat, says, "And it causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be" what? That is not godly, ladies and gentlemen. God does not use force. And it doesn't matter how many Christians and how many pastors embrace Dominionism. It is not godly, it is satanic. Anything that forces your will is not of God. Revelation 13 has already forewarned us that this plan is coming. So how will Satan attempt to implement this godless plan is the $64,000 question that I raise. I'm talking about the chosen ones. Oddly enough, there is a religious group with a party affiliation, with a particular party affiliation, that is convinced that Donald J. Trump is the chosen one to implement that plan. They believe that he's been chosen to assist them in establishing Dominionism in the United States of America. They believe that he's been sent by God to aid them in taking our country back for God. They believe that he is not just chosen, but he's also prophetic. They believe that because King Cyrus is mentioned in Isaiah chapter 45, they believe and they are convinced that it is not irony or happenstance that Donald Trump just happens to be the 45th president. Next slide. That he just happens to be the 45th president of the United States of America. There's even a movie out about him. But you know what? I skipped something. Go back to, Mike, go back to. Next one. There it is. Play it.
I see the greatest president in history. Of course he is. He was chosen by God.
Calling our president, Donald Trump, they're calling him Cyrus.
Donald Trump as a Cyrus gets it.
President Trump will be like Cyrus.
Republicans say he's not just chosen, he's prophetic. There's even a movie about him. It's called The Trump Prophecy. This is serious, ladies and gentlemen. They are not playing games with you. Now, strangely enough, I too believe that this president is one of the chosen ones, but for entirely different reasons. I need to make that real clear. I believe he is a chosen one, not because of what he's going to do for God's people, but because of what he's going to do to God's people. But even though Satan has a plan to establish his dominion on earth by deceiving misguided men and women to accomplish his satanic mission, Satan has a problem, and his problem is this. The U.S. Constitution is a major obstacle for Satan. To accomplish his aims, Satan must get rid of it. He cannot control the U.S. and ultimately the world with our Constitution intact. To reach his goals, the Constitution must disappear. But why? Here's why. The Constitution guarantees our freedoms as American citizens. The Constitution, it was set up by the Founding Fathers as our protection against tyranny. The Constitution guarantees our freedom of religion, speech, press, freedom to assemble, and freedom to petition the government. Revelation 13, verses 11 through 18 cannot be fulfilled as long as the U.S. Constitution is intact. Therefore, there must come a major change in our form of government to allow these prophecies to be fulfilled. Was there Russian interference into the 2016 election? Yes. I have the Mueller report. I'm reading it. You ought to read it too. But there's a bigger issue than that. In Daniel chapter 2:21 says that God sets up kings and it's God that removes kings. Daniel 4:25 says that it is God who functions in the kingdom of men and he sets up those who he chooses. If God doesn't want a president to be president, he will not be president. If he gets to that chair, it's because God has permitted it for a reason. Therefore, permit me to share with you two plausible reasons why Donald Trump was chosen as the 45th president of the United States of America. Point number one. I believe that Donald Trump was chosen as president because he would begin the process of changing our form of governance so that Revelation 13, 11 through 18 can be fulfilled. Because until that prophecy is fulfilled, Christ cannot come. So it must be fulfilled. But before it can happen, certain things must take place. There are two ways that Trump can implement Dominionism in the U.S. First way is this. He can transition the U.S. from a democracy to an autocratic or a totalitarian form of government. Neither one of those should be an option. So Satan can't fulfill his plans of world dominance with our current democracy in place. It must go. So let's look at the passage one more time because there's some clues there that we need to focus on. Revelation 13:11. I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Verse 11 indicates that a major shift in the nature of U.S. politics, and particularly a major change in our government, is going to take place in the last days before time of trouble and before the coming of the Lord. It is because I'm convinced that Donald Trump has been raised up to, at the very least, partially fulfill Revelation 13, 11 through 18. Here's how. That passage reveals that the U.S. starts off lamb-like, protective, peaceful. But then it transitions and begins to function like a beast. when it happens, we will see things we've never seen before in the U.S. Have you ever seen a president order babies snatched from the arms of their mothers and incarcerated in concentration camps at the southern border? Have you ever seen a president incite near riots and violence in their presidential campaigns? Have you ever seen a president refer to other nations as S-hole nations? Have you ever seen a president acknowledge that because he's a star, that he can just walk up to women willy-nilly and just touch their private parts? And when he's exposed, he will lie about it. We should have expected a president that is an uncouth, uncultured Philistine. Because the Greek word for beast in Revelation 13 is the word therion, which means a bloodthirsty beast that devours its enemies. What we fail to understand is this, ladies and gentlemen. When we read the passage prior to the election in November 2016, what we fail to understand is this, is that a nation or an organization takes on the nature of its leader or of its leadership. An organization, a company, even a country takes on the nature of its leader. Our churches, ladies and gentlemen, reflect the personality of our leaders. Same is true of the United States of America. And we see it all across his base. Well, in Revelation 13 reveals that one day the U.S. will function like a dragon because we have elected a president that functions like a dragon. Revelation 13 prophesied that the U.S. will function like a beast because we've elected a president that functions like a beast. Please be informed that Trump is in the process of exchanging our democratic form of government with a more autocratic form of government. And you need to know it, and you need to see it for what it is when it's happening, because it's happening right before your very eyes. The U.S. is in trouble because our beloved democracy is in trouble. Democracies are failing all over the world. Viktor Orban in Hungary has taken his country from a democratic process to an autocratic process. Vladimir Putin runs an autocratic process where kleptocrats are leading the government. And so democracy all over the world is starting to be questioned and crumble. And our democracy, ladies and gentlemen, here in the U.S. is in trouble. Our democracy is under severe attack and is on life support, and I'm not the only one who thinks so. There are individuals who are truly convinced that Trump's intention is to destroy our democracy. I want you to listen to Paul Krugman, who's an economist and a columnist for the New York Times. Listen to this clip.
If Trump is reelected, if Republicans retake control of the House, what are the odds that we will really have a functioning democracy after that?
I mean, that's a pretty terrifying idea.
If you're not terrified, you're not paying attention.
If you're not terrified of what's going on with this president and this government, then you're not paying attention. Listen to Jeff Daniels.
We're going to find out if the big gamble is to go all the way to November 2020, which I agree, and lose, it's the end of democracy.
Did you hear that? They believe that if Kamala Harris doesn't win the election, or Elizabeth Warren, or Bernie Sanders, or any of the other 23 Democrats, and he gets reelected, the politicians in this country who believe it's the end of democracy as we know it. and America changes. I believe I got one more clip. Let's see. No, I don't. I took it out. Democracy, ladies and gentlemen, is on the decline around the world. The slide is gradual but steady. Here's how the slide goes. From democracy, next one is autocracy, in the slide downward. So you go from democracy to autocracy. What are the characteristics of an autocratic government and society? Here it is. Autocracy, compound word. Auto, one. Kratia, the rule by. The rule by, one. An autocratic society is a one-party system where your voting privileges disappear. It replaces free elections. Political opponents are listen to this. Listen to the description of an autocratic society. Political opponents are demonized. The press becomes the enemy of the state or fake news. Corruption becomes normalized and accepted. Kleptocrats, klepto, thief, kratia, the rule by thieves becomes accepted and normalized. And thieves and kleptocrats are put in power. And foreigners, xenophobia. Xenophobia is the belief that others are beneath you. That's why they're trying to build a border. That's why they one of the first actions was keep out the Muslims. When the fact of the matter is, statistics are clear. When you look at terrorism in the U.S., the greatest terrorists are not Muslims, are not brothers, are not Hispanics. Over 70% of terroristic acts take place by conservative white men. If he wants to build a wall, he needs to build a wall for them. Build that wall so you can protect our schools and our churches and our synagogues and our malls and our concerts. An autocratic society. Sounds like this administration. That's where we're going. The next one is totalitarianism. That's the next slide downward. North Korea is a totalitarian state where you have no rights. Are there signs that America is transitioning from a liberal democracy to a repressive form of government, particularly an autocratic form of government? Let's take a look. In their seminal work entitled How Democracies Die, these two incredible authors, Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, identify 4 indicators of authoritarian, autocratic behavior in countries when they're on the slide from democracy down to autocracy, or worse yet, totalitarianism. Here they are. See your homework. See if any of these present in the United States of America today. If so, we're in trouble. Indicator number 1, the rejection of the rule of law. They say that when the leaders of a leader of a nation consistently rejects the law or the Constitution, and that country is on a downward slide from democracy to autocracy. We have a president who's a lawless individual. The fact that Hope Hicks and William Barr and Don McGahn and all these others who were subpoenaed, but he refused to allow them. He defied defied the subpoena from a co-equal branch of government. He's breaking the law. And he does it with impunity and consistently. Indicator number 2, denial of the legitimacy of political opponents. It was Donald Trump who created the birtherism campaign. It was Donald Trump who, during his campaign, said about Hillary, crooked Hillary, and locked her up. Number 3, toleration or encouragement of violence. Never before in the history of the United States have we seen a presidential campaign be so violent. He even declared, get him out of here, beat him up. And if you get sued, I'll pay your lawsuit. It was during his that hate groups came out of the woodwork. Number 4, readiness to curtail civil liberties of opponents, including media. Fake news. There's yet another way Trump could circumvent our democracy altogether. And Trump could establish martial law in the U.S. All he has to do, for any reason, there was a law that was put in the books in 1962, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and the law that an executive order 11490 can be passed if the President of the United States deems that the sovereignty and the safety of America is at risk. He can pass executive order 11490. When he does that, then FEMA passes a litany of other executive orders, and it takes over the entire country. Overnight, America becomes a police state. Martial law is imposed. What you need to know and understand is that when martial law is imposed, there is no Constitution. There are no First Amendment or Second Amendment or Third Amendment or Fourth Amendment rights. The president runs the country through the military. Overnight, the United States can become a police state. And he can force you to do anything he wants to do. My second and final reason why Trump won the election is point number 2. God chose Trump to prepare God's people for the time of trouble and the second coming of Christ. What is the remnant church's role in these last days? God says we are to function as watchmen. Ezekiel 33 says, watchmen, I'm going to put you on the wall of Zion, and when you see trouble coming, I want you to blow the trumpet. I want you to blow the trumpet. But we got a problem. The watchman's asleep. Adventist church is asleep. The LGBT community has punked us, silenced our witness. We've got preachers standing in our pulpit today who are afraid to preach our message. We got preachers today who want to be Joel Osteen. They don't want to step on anybody's toes. They want to make people come to church feeling good and go home feeling good. We got Adventists who want to be like everybody else and look like everybody else and eat everything that everybody else eats and wear everything that everybody else wears and goes everywhere that everybody else goes. No wonder we can't be what we were called to be. We're asleep as a church. Wake up and blow the trumpet for God's sake. Our church is asleep. And it needs to wake up. Ellen White says this. I saw one standing on a high platform with arms extended. He turned and pointed in every direction saying, a world perishing in ignorance of God's holy law, and Seventh-day Adventists are asleep. She says, the work which the church has failed to do in a time of peace and prosperity, she will have to do in a terrible crisis under most discouraging, forbidding circumstances. Why Trump? God knew that because he is so out of the box that he would get the attention of the saints of God. God knew that he would arrest our attention and cause us to start preparing for the coming of the Lord. It's time to start right now. Here's why. Revelation 13, 1 through 18. There are two political powers and both have world dominion aspirations. But it's the first beast that takes the lead. It's the Catholic Church as the spiritual power broker across the globe that takes the lead. Revelation 13 says Catholics and Protestants in the U.S. will join forces. The plan calls for Rome to spread Catholic doctrine across the globe, and Protestantism will assist them in that process. They become a lethal duo. More lethal than Starsky and Hutch. More lethal than Cagney and Lacey. More powerful than Shaq and Kobe. Michael and Scotty. Dr. J and Moses. Or Carson Wentz and Deshaun Jackson. Super Bowl. The prophecy says this: the whole world marveled at this miracle and gave allegiance to the beast. Ladies and gentlemen, when they join ranks, entire denominations and religions will join them. And this march will take place all over the globe. This movement spreads like wildfire across the globe, and it looks like it's going to be victorious. But, I said but, the word of God says this movement is going forward, but it says in 1144 that, but tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. What is that? Who is that? That is the chosen ones, ladies and gentlemen. That is the remnant church that is awakened from its slumber, is standing up, is preaching the straight testimony. In Rome, and the evangelicals are troubled by our message as we preach the three angels' message, as we warn the world. The chosen ones stand up and call his right name. The power of the Holy Ghost inspires us to speak truth to power. Ellen White says, as the controversy extends into new fields and the minds of the people are called to God's downtrodden law, Satan is astir. The power attending the message will only madden those who oppose it. The clergy will put forth almost superhuman efforts to shut away the light lest it shine upon their flocks. But every means at their command, they will endeavor to suppress the discussion of these vital questions. The church appeals to the strong arm of civil power, and in this work, Papists and Protestants unite. Rome and the Protestant churches are upset. They conclude that all Sabbath breakers must die. They pass a law that on a certain day, all Sabbath breakers must be killed. And when it looks like we have no hope of surviving, something unexpected happens in heaven. What is it, preacher? I'm glad you asked. The Bible says the chosen one does something in heaven above. My Bible said the chosen one, that he does something that the enemies of God's people don't anticipate. Daniel 12 says, and at that time shall Michael stand up. When Michael stands up, stuff happens. When Michael stands up, our fortunes change. When Michael stands up, the disobedient are humbled. We were living in the projects. I know y'all don't know anything about the projects up here, but we were living in the projects. This is my project, 5 Fraser Street. I lived that back building, building 5, apartment 3A. This particular day, I left the house. My dad, who was the king of our castle, was sitting in his chair reading the newspaper. And I go outside. This particular day, I'm hanging with the big boys. And I must have been in 4th, 5th grade. And they let me hang. I was in my glory. I was hanging with Brucey Kitchen and Van Miles and Alan Miles and Pepe and Anthony and Garland. I was in my glory. And all of a sudden, my little brother Reggie, who's here with me tonight, comes to me and said, Daddy wants you. I was positioned, change that building right there in the middle. It wasn't there. I was positioned right over here. And I could look down and I looked to see if my dad was looking out the window. And he wasn't. I was still in my glory. So I said, no, he didn't. So he leaves. I'm in my glory. My little brother comes back. Says, Daddy wants you. I wasn't ready yet. I said, no, he didn't. And he goes back. All of a sudden, my dad comes out of building 5. Homeboy came out like this. I said, no, not now, Dad, not now. What happened? The king of my castle stood up. Now, I don't know if Popeye was on. At that moment, but I can imagine him saying, I stood all I can stand. I can't stand no more. Michael stood up. My knee, I felt like Belshazzar. The Bible says when the handwriting started writing on the wall, Belshazzar's knees started knocking together. My knees started knocking together. Bible says Michael stands up. He stands up and he says, apple, peaches, pumpkin pie. Who's not ready? My Bible tells me that Michael gets on. He leaves heaven with all of the angelic hosts. He's riding on a cloud which consists of angels. He's dressed in white. He's changed his priestly robes, his priestly garb, and he's put on his kingly garb. It is not a cap, it is not a gown, but there is a robe, there's a crown. His vesture is dipped in blood. And he breaks through the clouds. Again, Mike, you did it? And when I see him, before I see him, I want you to know that I'm in the gym 3 times a week. I go to LA Fitness. Why? Because at some point we're going to have to run, and I want you to know there's a whole lot of folk out here who have guns. And if they're going to hit me, I'm going to give them a moving target. So you can. But I'm letting you know right now. As soon as I see him, I'm going to break bad. Why? Because the chosen one has come. My big brother has come to rescue his people. And not only am I going to break bad, I'm going to follow the word of God. I'm going to stop. I'm drawing a line and saying I'm not running another inch. Why? Because here's what the word of God says. It says, yea, though I walk, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemy. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Yea, though I walk, I will fear no evil. And it was you know what bothers me? Adventists bother me who have no faith in God. The Adventists who are absolutely terrified of the time of trouble. How many of y'all believe in God? How many believe that God can protect you from anything? I want you to stand up. Stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. We got to start practicing some faith. I want you to stand up. I want you to move out. I want you to spread out a little bit. I want you to spread out a little bit. We got to practice here. I want you to spread out. Because here we go. Here's what the Bible says. Yay! Wait, before it happens, when I see him coming, I'm going to get my George Jefferson on. Go ahead, Mike. Yea, though I walk. All right, people, start walking. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemy. Thou anointest my head with oil. A cup runneth over. Surely, 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 goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever and ever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Everybody should be standing right now. Everybody should be. Come on, stand up on your feet and give God a praise again. Come on, everybody. Come on, put your hands together and bless God for his word. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Come on, everybody. Let's go back. Sing that old song of the church.